Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Can I tell you, President Trump is right. Stephen Colbert should be taking off television and never allowed on television again. Now, what is making you say this, Johnny Mac? Is this some sort of political stance? No. Stephen Colbert has signed up with the new Star Trek series Starfleet Academy. Have you seen this trailer? Complete garbage. Why do comedians insist on destroying Star Trek? I'm looking at you, Tig Notaro. I'm looking at you, Patton Oswalt as Doug the Vulcan. And now Stephen Colbert has sold out to Alex Kurtzman and this horrible, horrible, horrible crap that they call Star Trek. I love my Star Trek. You've heard me rant about this. Stephen, what are you doing to me? Why did you do this? Stephen Colbert will voice Starfleet Academy's digital dean of students. According to the press release, he'll be giving daily announcements to the students and alerting them of anything that needs their immediate attention. President Trump, get this guy off TV now. Thank you for your attention. Now, before I tell you this next story, let me just do a quick Google of Bill Burr. We got to talk about Bill Burr again. Okay, it is 12:50 on Monday. I've been looking for updates on this story, but before I took the weekend off there, I saw fans had said that Bill Burr had canceled a plan to tape an episode of the Monday morning podcast that would have been taped in front of a live audience on Saturday. Burr was supposed to tape a live episode of Monday Morning Podcast at the Gardena Cinema in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles this weekend. I could have gone. So the venue had posted the cancellation for about 45 minutes. Then, as I understand things, they took it down. The speculation is that they caught some negative comments about Mr. Burr, so they were just like, let's not have it. But fans in the Bill Burr subreddit noticed it. One fan asked, "Why postpone the show, Bill?" Another said, "But I thought Billy Blood Money said it was bots. How can they come to a show if they're bots?" Now, I just looked when I said, let me Google Bill Burr at 12:50 on Monday. There was no episode of the Monday podcast. So, first of all, I hope Bill is okay and everything's okay with his family and he's healthy. We can disagree on ideas. We don't wish anything negative on anyone except Stephen Colbert, who should be taken off television immediately for siding up with the Star Trek people. So hopefully all is okay with the Burrs, but just interesting that he canceled the taping and there's no episode on Monday. Omid Jalili wrote a piece for The Guardian. Omid writes, after 15 years of turning down offers to perform stand-up comedy in Saudi Arabia due to the country's human rights record, this time I took the gig. Why? There's a push for change in Saudi and signs are discernible, yet many from the outside world would rather comedians in the West stayed away. Skipping ahead, I am no stranger to cancel culture. I was canceled after 9/11 simply for being Middle Eastern, as Arab terrorists were behind the attacks on the Twin Towers. This is despite the fact that I am not Arab, nor am I, contrary to popular opinion, a terrorist. In certain circles, there have been calls to boycott my UK tour Namaste, a show in which I try to explore the nuances of the complex geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. After explaining the restrictions on performing in Saudi were exactly the same as in Dubai, basically no jokes about the royal family, no disrespecting Islam, and no humiliation of the government, a concerned friend texted me, "I think you're at risk of invalidating your right to make jokes about anything important." My show in Riyadh had a lot of material about the Saudis themselves. The perception that we as comedians were all being paid to be silent was as laughable as the idea that Dave Chappelle, a hugely successful comic with an estimated worth of $70 million, was doing his show in Riyadh for the money. Skimming ahead, Jalili writes, the comedy guide Chortle erroneously reported that the pay was between $375 and $1.6 million for those doing solo shows. One thing East and West can agree on is you don't talk about your fee publicly because it is likely to cause consternation among the other performers, most of whom received a significantly smaller amount than the American podcaster was purportedly set to receive. I assume that means Tim Dillon, which is where the 375 number comes from. Again, skipping ahead here, Jalili writes, if I had an inkling that changes similar to those emerging in Saudi Arabia right now were happening inside Iran and a comedy festival were taking place in Tehran, and pigs were flying, he adds, I can assure you I would be on the first pig over. Long piece here in The Guardian. Let me just wrap up here where he writes, and the gigs were great. Packed houses, young crowds, popcorn, standing ovations, even heckling. About 80% of the audiences were locals, many of whom had never seen a live comedy gig. Whitney Cummings on her podcast said, by the way, any comic that has ever worked with Live Nation, which is all of them, has taken Saudi money, but keep up with your little rants. When you get a second, Google Saudi Arabia Live Nation so you can be informed on the fact that anyone who has worked with Live Nation, every stand-up comic has taken Saudi money or bought a ticket through Live Nation, went to a Live Nation event. All the actors who were represented by William Morris Agency, which is all of them, if you want to send them notes too. All right, let's Google Saudi Arabia Live Nation. I'm doing this in real time. I haven't done this before. The first thing that comes up is from Music Business Worldwide, which says Saudi Wealth Fund exits Live Nation stake. The second story, also from 2024, Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund sells Live Nation stake. And scrolling down from April 2020, Forbes reported Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund buys $500 million stake. Her point may be valid between 2020 and 2024, but it doesn't seem to be presently valid or valid prior to it. And I'll remind you, there was a pandemic in 2020, so I don't know how many comedy tickets you bought in 2020 or 2021. You may not be as guilty as Whitney Cummings says. She said, though, I'm trying to help you sound less racist. She then discussed Nepo babies, people whose dads have points on huge television shows are like, I have a backup plan, a huge trust fund. You're a sellout for making money. And then I have a major, major problem with this next thing she said. The same people who are like, if they found out a Fox journalist was murdered, they would truly throw a party. That is not cool, Whitney. That is not true. You're a jerkhole for saying that. I really don't think any comedian would be like, oh, cool, a Fox journalist was murdered. That's just terrible.
Also the same people who are like, if they found out a Fox journalist was murdered, they would truly throw a party.
How dare you? Gianmarco Cerezi spoke to currentaffairs.org and said the numbers that I've heard float at the top were like 1.6 million, and I would imagine easily that, if not more. I don't think George Carlin would have ever performed at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, but he was also never asked. These comedians used to not enter the sphere of influence, and now, because of podcasting and the fact that comedians were kind of on the front end of that, and social media has allowed our voices to expand, there are new questions. What are we? What is our role in America, let alone globally? It's complicated. I performed in places whose governments I didn't align with. However, I do think you can make distinctions, and the distinction should be made that the government is funding this, a government that, has this history of human rights abuses. It's easy for me to stand high because I wasn't invited to Riyadh. Trump didn't ask to go on my podcast, neither did Kamala, but I think we need to reestablish what our expectation is. If a comedian like Theo Von is going to go on his podcast and cry tears over Palestinian suffering, and then 2 weeks later have J.D. Vance on and joke about how he's going to go hang out at his pool house, I hope that we cultivate an audience that goes, hey, Theo, what the F? That's BS. I don't buy this. I hope that the stink of this Riyadh Comedy Festival is great enough that some comedians are forced to confront where they stand and what the responsibility is to themselves and to their audiences. Hopefully, we can move on from this subject. I didn't want to talk about it today, but there were all those stories I just told you about. What should have been the lead is Marc Maron wrapped up his podcast. His final guest on Monday, former President Obama. Maron was asked why Obama for the final guest. Marc Maron said, the first time was an important turning point, certainly for me personally. For a sitting president to come to my little garage at my house, it was a big deal. And I think it was a big game-changing episode for podcasting in general in terms of the attention it brought to the medium. I was happy to see him again and talk about the current administration and the world we're living in now, but also, to honor my show. The Times was curious. Any conditions for the interview? No, neither time. There were no conditions, no vetting of questions, and no request for a pre-edit. Mark, how do you think it went? Last time there was a motorcade, a Secret Service, and many staff involved, and he was still disarming and grounded and present. This time it was more casual, just me and him in his office. So I knew it would be even better, and that turned out to be true. He was very aware that he was our last guest, and the last episode meant something to me and culturally. I guess at some point in September and October, this podcast reached a point where I just can't avoid the politics of it all. So I'll jump in the pool here. Obama said, if you decide not to vote, that's a consequence. Let me start right there. Please vote. Whoever you vote for, that's up to you. But please vote, Obama said. If you decide not to vote, that's a consequence. If you're a Hispanic man and you're frustrated about inflation, and so you decided, you know what, all that rhetoric about Trump doesn't matter. I'm just mad about inflation. And now your sons are being stopped in LA because they look Latino and maybe without the ability to call anybody, might just be locked up. Well, that's a test. It'd be great if we weren't tested this way, but you know what? We probably need to be shaken out of our complacency. Maron used the line he used in his special, we've annoyed the average American into fascism. Obama responded, you just can't be a scold all the time. You can't constantly lecture people without acknowledging that you've got some blind spots too and that life's messy. I listened to about a third of it this morning. I found it very compelling. I just had to get to work and didn't have time to listen to more of it, but that's it. That's a wrap. And at the end of the program, he thanked a few people and said that his Thursday show was actually the goodbye episode. But that's a wrap on Marc Maron for now, anyway. I have not yet seen Saturday Night Live, but the Department of Homeland Security did. In the cold open, Amy Poehler reunited with Tina Fey to play Attorney General Pam Bondi and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. Tina Fey's character said, "I'm here to tell you this Democrat government shutdown needs to end now." By the way, you know what? I don't care. I'm telling you this because this blew my mind. So I was out in California on the weekend, and there was a national forest, and I wanted to check it out. And I wanted to know, like, do I have to pay to get in the forest? This is for real. You can look at this right now. This is on the U.S. Forest Service webpage. This is the phrasing. Again, whatever your politics, but here's the phrasing on a government website. The radical left Democrats shut down the government. This government website will be updated periodically during the funding lapse for mission-critical functions. President Trump has made it clear he wants to keep the government open and support those who feed, fuel, and clothe the American people. I mean, just that a government website has the phrase, the radical left Democrats. Now, maybe you think the Democrats are the radical left. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. It's not why we're here. My point is, I can't believe we're using language like that. I digress. In a statement shared with Entertainment Weekly, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said, SNL's absolutely right. The Democrats' shutdown does need to end.
Gossip Corner, whispers in the street. Gossip Corner, probably about Pete. Gossip Corner, where the rumors meet with Johnny Mac. It's always a treat.
On Gossip Corner, Pittsburgh Pirates Paul Skeens and girlfriend Libby Dunn were at LSU attending the football game. They were seen hanging out with famous comedian Theo Vaughn. Libby Dunn posted a picture of the three of them on her Instagram story. Out today on the 800-pound gorilla YouTube channel, it's Jessica Kirson's No Material Crowdwork special. Jessica has been in the news lately. I don't know if you heard about this. She was recently at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Jessica said, I hope that this festival could help LGBTQ plus people in Saudi Arabia feel seen and valued. I'm grateful that I was able to do precisely that. To my knowledge, I'm the first openly gay comic to talk about it on stage in Saudi Arabia. I received messages from attendees sharing how much it meant to them to participate in a gay-affirming event. At the same time, I deeply regret participating under the auspices of the Saudi government. The Hollywood Reporter has confirmed with two sources that the Human Rights Coalition has received the entirety of Jessica's fee. Anyway, if you enjoyed Jessica's comedy, the No Material Crowdwork special is out on the 800-pound gorilla YouTube channel today. Jimmy Kimmel won the September ratings. The first time he's actually won the time slot, apparently, according to Late Nighter, if I read the story correctly. Tonight, Jimmy Kimmel is teaming up with Jimmy Fallon. It's that TV show On Brand with Jimmy Fallon. It apparently is some sort of football season marketing challenge involving Captain Morgan. On Brand, we see Fallon and Kimmel introducing contestants to the episode's task, developing an ad campaign built around bringing crews together on and off the field. Are you familiar with the British teen comedy sitcom The Inbetweeners? A fantastic show that, it's probably 15, 20 years ago. I found this thing on cable, whatever. It's fantastic. There was an American remake that was okay, but the British version is fantastic. The show's creators have a deal to bring it back. It's unclear how it will come back or where you're going to be able to watch it. Is it a reboot? Is it a retake? It is believed it revolves around the original characters, who've got to be at least in their 40s now, I would guess. The Inbetweeners originally was broadcast on E4 in the UK between 2008 and 2019. It followed the misadventures of suburban teenager Will McKenzie and his friends Simon Cooper, Neil Sutherland, and Jay Cartwright, as they navigated school life, friendship, male bonding, lad culture, and failed sexual encounters. 2 hit movies followed in 2011 and 2014. I welcome that back. I will watch that. And the Joan Rivers estate has auctioned off over 300 pieces of memorabilia once owned by Joan Rivers. They included some of her wigs, x-rays of her dog Spike's thorax, and some royal family-related keepsakes. Melissa Rivers, Joan's daughter, said the timing felt right. I'm finally emotionally ready to let go. Joan passed away in 2014. 2 x-rays of Spike's thorax went for $576. They came with a manila envelope from Spike's vet. A copy of the May 26, 1986 issue of People with Joan Rivers and Spike on the cover sold for $1,920. 2 of the wigs sold for $57.60 and $28.80. 2 voodoo dolls went for $448. And that is your comedy news for today, all right? At least it was fun at the end. I know it got a little feisty in the middle, and Stephen Colbert must be removed from television immediately. President Trump, what are you doing? If you can create peace in the Middle East, Certainly, you could save Star Trek. Can you do that? Can we make Star Trek great again? You want to impress me? Do that. See you tomorrow.